Zero risk, maximum returns. Mastering stock market linked investments. Available on Amazon, paperback and Kindle. See info below in video description. Book provided by the author, Brooke Lunsford.
Hosted by Brooke Lunsford. Produced by Harris Productions.
Well, I hope it's been a great weekend for you. Here we are, it's Monday, and I was a little slow to roll out this morning, but I'm up, I'm at 'em, and like I tell the kids at school sometimes, as soon as I get rolling, I count that as a day, because I think getting up and getting rolling seems to be the hardest part of it all. So I don't know how you feel about what we're studying. The Bible is the final word. To me, it's the first word. It starts with Adam and Eve, the first people. And science would have you to believe that this planet's 100 billion years old, and that's fine. I don't care what science says. It would have you believe that there was people before Adam and Eve, and once again, whatever. So that's fine too. So Myrtle, Kim, good to see you guys this morning. So I have no problem with everything. You know, if they find a fossil that says this dinosaur's toe bone was 80 million years old, I have no problem with that. And the reason I don't have a problem with it is because I don't understand why people, you know, if God has always existed, and that's part of the belief in God, is that he is self-existent, and he's lived forever. Why would we think, are we so arrogant, maybe is how I should phrase it. Tracy, are we so arrogant to think God hadn't done something before he did Adam and Eve and before he did us people? Sandy, good to see you this morning. I mean, am I wrong on that? For those that are just popping on, my statement was this: science finds a dinosaur bone. Science claims the bone is 70 or 80 million years old. I have no problem with that. Somebody says, well, we found a skeleton of a human that was way before Adam and Eve. I don't have a problem with that either. And you say, well, but you say you believe in creation and you believe in Jesus. Here's what I believe about God speaking 6 days of human existence starting there in Genesis chapter 1. I believe that God has always existed, TG, because that's part of the doctrine of God that you and I have studied on a few times. So if God's always existed, and we look up at all these planets and all this stuff going on out there, why would we not think, Sammy, that these other planets at one time could have been Earth, right? Or that one day, I keep thinking that one day God's going to, when he changes our bodies in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, that he might change our focus. And when he changes our focus, we're going to see all these other worlds are inhabited by something. And I went to church with one of the finest Christian people I ever went to when I first started in Milton, because I'd gone to school with his kids, and I'd watched this guy by the name of Chester Bragg. I watched him live Jesus in front of us for the first 30 years of my life. And he was always like, man, I can't wait to see what kind of animals that we have in heaven. And if you've ever watched Star Wars, if you notice, they always have some weird looking animals in the Star Wars movies. So once again, Spielberg and George Lucas are Jewish men. Once again, you know, there's all those unconditional promises that the Israelite people, descendants of, have that, you know, we don't have. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. So not to bounce all over the place, but I have no problem with finding an 80 million year old dinosaur bone, because maybe God needed dinosaurs to be here. I have no problem with finding people thousands of years before Adam and Eve. And the reason I don't have a problem with that is because God gave us this Bible, and he didn't say this is all there ever was from Genesis to Revelation. He said this is what you need to know, right? And even John over there, when he was writing his books, and when John was talking about the life of Jesus, he made the statement, it's recorded as a verse. He says, I suppose that the world itself could not hold the books that could be written about Jesus. So once again, we don't have everything that Jesus has ever done, and we don't have everything God's ever done, because you and I are looking at this thing, and right now we are at about 6,000 years of human history. But in God's history, that is 6 days. So think about that. So anyway, we better move forward. Maureen, good to see you this morning. We talked a little bit about the kingdoms of the world and how they have persecuted the Israelite people since Nero and Rome, 20, 30 years after Jesus died. And then how, when we got to 1000 AD, which to us would be about 1,000 years ago, England ran the Jewish people out of England in their attempt to get rid of them. They extorted the Jewish people. They made them pay money. They took their goods. I mean, it was a treacherous time 1,000 years ago to be a Jewish person. So then we get into the 1300s. In the 1300s, France took advantage of the Jewish people. And all the Jewish people of France, the men, the women, and the children, to about 100,000, were stripped of all their possessions. Man, Benita, I don't know about you, but man, it would be hard to keep following the promise of a God that said they would send their Messiah and keep going through what these people were going through. Because remember, the Jewish people, if they were really Jewish, they dressed a little different than everybody else. They were easy to pick out, so therefore they would be easy to persecute. So again, England persecuted them and put them out of the country. 500 years or 300 years later, France did. From the 1340s to the 1350s, 1360s, we learned about the Black Death, the plague that hit, and how in Europe, when this plague is knocking out all these people, and the Israelites, they're living through this, and people thought they were possessed with the devil and all kinds of different things, or that they started the plague since they weren't dying from it. Pretty scary, isn't it? To be thought, I mean, can you imagine somebody blaming you because they caught the flu or because they caught COVID? It's pretty scary. But then when we went back and looked at it, the reason for it is because of their personal hygiene, because of the way they took care of themselves, the way they pulled themselves out of the world and the worldly things. I take it here to the AIDS thing. Was it 20 or 30 years ago when AIDS came out on the scene? A lot of people were petrified. Well, if you weren't in that lifestyle, that sexual thing, you had a really good chance of not getting AIDS. But then if you worked in the medical community, it was like, well, do we even want to take care of these people? We swore an oath that we would do no harm, I think is what the doctors and nurses swear. But, it's like, man, these people are coming in here just like COVID, and a lot of nurses, Benita could tell you, a lot of them retired at this thing because they were like, man, I'm not going to do that. I'm not risking my life treating a patient. So anyway, so we've had that happen throughout the years. And we left off Friday with, I think it was Thursday, with the Holocaust of Spain. And in that Inquisition, we learned about some of the treacherous things that had happened, some of the starvation that the people had gone through. We learned about the Iron Maiden, which was an iron-like casting of like a barrel type thing with nails on the inside, and they would put you inside of it and slam it shut, and the nails would pierce you and die an excruciating death. And then we got down to how Ferdinand and Isabella, now once again, what happens in 1492, this guy named Columbus. Columbus is about to set sail and discover the Americas or the Caribbean islands or whatever he discovers, right? So they are wanting to ban the Jewish people, okay? And a Jewish man offered 600,000 crowns for the revocation of the edict. So, they're contemplating, maybe this is the first time a government official is about to take a bribe, but then this other guy goes, Termeliqua or something like that, and he starts saying that, that Ferdinand and Isabella are selling out, and just like Judas sold out Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, these people are selling out the Spanish people if they let the Jewish people stay for 600,000 crowns. So what's our problem with all this, okay, is a lot of this persecution of the Jewish people comes from the fact that these people think they're doing Jesus' will by killing God's chosen people. So again, they didn't have the information that you and I have today, Tony. They didn't have the Bible complete with the study Bible and all this doctrinal information. But we know that it is never good. For example, right now with Israel being at war with Hamas and whoever else is behind the scenes here, we better stay on the side of what's right. And that is to back Israel. That's to pray for Israel, because they're the people that are chosen in this Bible to sit at the head of the table. All nations are blessed through them. Why? Because that's where Jesus' bloodline came. In the 1,000-year millennial reign with rest on earth, what's going to happen? Jesus is going to sit down on the throne. And this other Jewish king by the name of David is going to have another kind of throne or position. It's going to be lower than Jesus, but he'll be recognized during this 1,000-year millennial reign. So we're looking at all this and this persecution that the Jewish people are having because of Matthew 27:25, where they said, let this man's blood be upon us and our children. So once again, be careful what you ask God for, because guess what God does in this situation? He says, okay, you asked for it, now you've got it. And all this pain and persecution is coming. So now we're getting into this thing where we're going to learn some things, okay? And probably the fact of the Declaration of Independence being signed in 1776 changes the freedom for the Jewish people, and it changes the freedoms of people around the world. And the United States becomes this beacon of hope that everybody wants to get to. And a lot of people still want to get here today for the freedoms that we have. It's not all crime and punishment and all a bunch of criminals. But once again, there were a lot of criminals back in the day that were shipped to this country. And that'd probably be another history lesson down the road. But here we go. The Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, and with the exception of Russia, the Jewish people today in all lands enjoy comparative freedom. So once again, we started that, but why did we do it? Remember the Declaration of Independence? Remember when I posted that and I highlighted those 4 different paragraphs and how all 4 paragraphs made a reference to the Creator, made a reference to relying on the divine power of God. So again, what are we learning from this? You know, we are in there as far as God using the United States of America to protect Israel, to provide freedoms for the world that had never been known before. But at the same time, make no mistake, don't put the United States up above Israel, because we're not, and we never will be. So just be thinking about that. So, how come these people, these Jewish people that have been from the time, they were nomads from the time of Abram wandering around, and Abram had battle after battle there, and God showed favor a lot of times. But then they get so strong by the time the 12 tribes come into power, and the 12 tribes come into power, and they get enslaved in Egypt because they prosper and they do such a great job. They scared Pharaoh and the Egyptians and said they're going to overthrow us. And that right there is, the end of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus. So again, these people have been persecuted, all these things, which is proof that only the real God could have protected these people the way that He's protected them. So Doug, good to see you. Myrtle, good to see you. Yes, we see that unspoken prayer request and we will remember it. So the secret of the endurance of the Israelites is this: their national law. Look, these people were looking for a Messiah. These people stayed off to themselves. They worshiped by themselves. God didn't even want them marrying outside the Jewish race. So once again, it kept them from a couple plagues. It kept them from some serious danger. And, as they're persecuted and as different countries take their possessions, God had this unconditional promise with them, so it probably didn't take them very long to build back up, and they moved on with life. So they had their national law that they believed in, that they worshiped to God, but they just didn't see the Messiah yet, and that's what the tribulation period is going to be for. It's going to be for the Jewish people to have their eyes opened and realize that Jesus is Jesus. So it preserved them from disease, controlled and regulated their passions, checked the baser impulses of their nature, and secure the vigor of their offspring. So once again, secured the vigor of their offspring. What does it matter? Or what does that mean? You know, two Jewish people having a child, they had, both parents had this unconditional blessing of a blessed life. And so the children that were fully Jewish people had like a double dose of this situation. And I think I told you earlier about how they controlled disease and regulated their passions. You know, they didn't live a perverted lifestyle. They didn't live a life of decadence. They didn't overeat. There was a lot of things. If we would live by what the Bible said to live by, you know, we would all probably be grafted in here with a little healthier lifestyle. So interesting stuff. So the second thing is here, and I hit on that a minute ago as well, was this national hope that the history of this people, and they've read about it from Genesis to Malachi, that you have a promise. And the promise is that you're going to sit at the head of the table. The promise is that you may be disobedient and you may be in captivity at times, and all these things may happen. But at the end of the day, there will be a day when you will sit at the head of the table, and all nations will bow down before Israel. And that's just part of what's going on here in this Israeli war right now. When they unleash what they have, they not only have the bombs and the military capability and the smarts and the technologies and all that, but they got the living and the true God on their side. If you read in the news yesterday, somehow these bombs backfired and the Hamas people bombed their own people, killed their own people. Only God does things like that to show you his power. See, the believer sees that and says, man, look how God used those people's own weapons against them. Now, the people that don't believe in God and have no idea what's going on, it just looks like something crazy happened. So anyway, there we go. So the hope of the Israelite people, that was the hope here in the 1700s when the Declaration of Independence gets signed, and when all this freedom starts to come their way and to other people, because we put in our declaration that you come to our country, you've got the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You've got the right to worship any way that you see fit. And again, big stuff. And the top of it all is the hope of the coming of the Messiah. Okay? So again, the Son is coming to the people of Israel. So they shall arise and dispel the gloom and usher in that bright millennial day. They know about the millennial reign of Jesus Christ on earth. Right? So when their eyes are opened in this tribulation period, which starts the moment that the church leaves here, and these people do get, all this promise fulfilled, and they say, hey man, our eyes are open. We know there's 7 years of tribulation period. We know the Messiah will sit on the throne, and we know we will be there with him, and the promise will be fulfilled. Now they've got to hope to endure even more of the persecution that they've persecuted with for the 2,000 years since Jesus has been gone. Pretty amazing stuff. If you stop and think about this, because I'll be honest, I kind of, how does it all piece together? Well, it all pieced together that England and France and Germany and Spain, the powers of the world, were still persecuting the Israelite people right up to the time the Declaration of Independence was signed. Now, let's move a little further. For the Jewish people today, there is no pillar of cloud by day, nor Shekinah flame by night. They have no altars, no sacrifices, no priests as in the former days. They do observe the Passover, but no paschal lamb is slain. They keep the great day of atonement, but no blood is shed to make reconciliation for sin. All sacrifices and oblations have ceased. They have no king, no judges, no prophets, no inspired writers. The Urim and the Thummim give no divine token. The word of God is precious, but there is no open vision. Why? Because Jesus said this is it. Don't add to or take away from this Bible. And see, the Jewish people don't accept any of that New Testament. So, the last great prophet, was the man of Galilee, but him they rejected. Remember that from Matthew 27:25. So, like their forefathers who took Joseph after they had rejected him, and they sold him for 20 pieces of silver, and he was hidden from their view in Egypt on the throne of Pharaoh, so the Jewish people took Jesus and their Joseph. And having rejected him, they sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, and now he is hidden from them on his Father's throne. See that parallel? See those types? How Joseph, at the end of the book of Genesis, was a type of Jesus to show him there is a Messiah, there is a deliverer, and how he was hid from his brothers because his brothers had sold him into slavery. But what was Joseph's only goal? Was to have a relationship with his brothers. What's Jesus's only goal, Myrtle? He wants a relationship with you and me. So, what is the point? The point is that the nation of Israel has been supplanted by the Gentiles. And as God's people, they have been somewhat supplanted because we've got this thing called the church that nobody ever saw coming before. See? Now, they will have their millennial reign with Jesus Christ on this earth if they're saved. Not only are they going to have that if they're saved, but then these sacrifices that they have used in the past, I always wondered, this is a lightning bolt for me, Myrtle, because I always wondered, how are they going to have these millennial sacrifices? Why would that be important for those to come back when us as Gentiles, we're grafted in here, but we don't observe that? But right here it is. It's because the Jewish people are not doing these things anymore, and God wants to put these sacrifices back in place and these observances back in place. So here's where we're at today. Hosea 3:4, it says, it is not their condition today, the fulfillment of the prophecy of Hosea. Now let's look at what Hosea said here. The children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, and without teraphim. Is it not that Jerusalem must be, according to Luke 21:24, trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled? So once again, the times of the Gentiles, from the beginning, from Babylon, Medo-Persia, Alexander the Great, and the fourth empire, the Roman Empire, the four empires of the world that Daniel talks about. Okay, those have come and gone. So our time as Gentiles is about fulfilled according to Luke 21:24. And then Paul comes on the scene here a little bit later, and he says, blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come, and so all of Israel shall be saved, according to Romans 11, verse 25 and 26. How are they going to be saved? They're going to see Jesus for who he is, because God can't change the plan. He can't say, man, I'm sorry that the Jewish people missed this. We're going to change it to where Jesus is not the center of it all. It can't be done. Say, Jesus died for the sins of the world. So they have got to recognize Jesus as the one who dies for the sins of the world. So that's where we're at there in that situation. So we see then that Israel, they have not been supplanted by the church or by the Gentile nations. See, we're all part of this thing, but the church was a way to mix Jewish believers and Christians into one body, called the body of Christ, called the church. And nobody saw this coming. So they are again to take the lead among the nations of the earth. So they're coming back to the front, the Israelite people. For this, they have been preserved. So once again, why does the devil want to kill all the Jewish people? Because it would break a promise of God that they would be blessed and sit at the head of all the tables. The other part of the blessing that's coming is it probably is in Satan's mind that if he could just kill all these people, then he'd break that promise of God, then he would still have a shot to take God's place and to rule this thing. So again, it's pretty scary thoughts. It's coming to the point, people are going to be perishing, people will be dying, and things are going to happen. And it's got to happen soon, because we're right in that present day Bible history, when the only thing left to happen is the church to leave here at what we call the rapture of the church, and then this 7-year tribulation period to start, where the eyes of the Jewish people are opened. Now they see Jesus for who he is. So Paul goes on and he answers his own question when he asked earlier, hath God cast away his chosen people, the Israelites? And Paul answers that with, God has not cast away his people, which he foreknew. Now, once again, we get into foreknowledge, foreknew, predestination. These people were predestined to sit at the head of the throne, predestined to be God's chosen people. God tells them about it from the time he pulls Abram out of the land of Ur. Nothing's going to ever change this. But we have this period of history. We call it the 69 weeks of prophecy of Daniel. And there's 69 weeks of God having the Jewish people at the head of it all are over, or not over, but now we've got those times of the Gentiles here in the middle, and we're going to have that 70th week, which is that 7-year of tribulation period, and that's when the Jewish people come back to the front and realize Jesus is who he says he is. And they're also going to have 12,000 from each of the tribes that will be sealed to tell people about Jesus, and people will get saved. So, in the 11th verse, Paul asks a second question. Have they stumbled? Have they stumbled that they should fall? Question mark. That is, have they fallen down